Welcome back to Mountain Connections right here on this Business Wednesday. Up first on our show today, we'll be speaking with Clayton Johnson virtually. He's a financial planner from Squire Wealth Advisors. We're happy to have him here with us today to talk more about the importance of financial literacy, especially post-pandemic. Clayton, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So let's start with a bit of the basics, if you don't mind. How do you define financial literacy, and why is it so important?
Yeah, so I define financial literacy as basically understanding the skills needed to um, plan for retirement, avoid and navigate the complications that happen with finances in general. So just having a general understanding of our interaction with finances and being able to prepare for the future.
And what is the most important first step towards that financial literacy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the most important first steps to financial literacy is actually self-literacy. Um, Personal finance, in most cases, is more personal than it is finance. So knowing ourselves and our emotions around money. So there are a lot of people that know themselves very well and know that as soon as they make money and it goes into their checking account, they'll spend it right away. And so they build systems where the moment they make that money, it automatically, a portion of it goes to a savings account. And these systems help them to prepare for the future, help them avoid pitfalls that happen when you spend all your money. And so they know themselves and they're able to plan around that. I think that's a really important step. And then in lockstep with that step is understanding your vision and your goals for the future. So one of the most common questions that I get as an advisor is, how much money should I save for retirement? Which is a really good question, um, but it varies for every person. There's lots of rules of thumb out there, the 10% rule, the 15% rule. Um, but if you're a 30-year-old and you want to retire early at 45, you're going to need to save significantly more than 15% of your income. So understanding what you personally want in the future, I think, is an absolute necessary first step to understanding what skills you need to implement, what financial literacy skills you need to implement in your life.
Now, you're focusing on long-term future for many people. Actually, retirement is closer for some than others. But how has the pandemic affected individuals as they are planning for retirement and they are trying to save, especially if perhaps they've lost their job, they weren't able to work as much, and they're really just trying to make ends meet? And retirement just feels like it's that much further out when they're trying to just make the day-to-day work. What would you tell those people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right. I do talk a lot about kind of what's the future because I'm very forward thinking that way. Um, but for those who are kind of in this situation where they may have lost their jobs or they're struggling with the current pandemic, is taking a look at kind of your situation and developing a plan. Sometimes in those situations, we kind of have to cut back our budget. We may have to sacrifice a little bit. And it's not the answer that we want, but having a plan for these crises, because this isn't the last one that we're going to face. We have a financial crisis historically every 5 to 7 years. They're not obviously all COVID-like, but we can expect more of this to come in the future. And so being able to develop a plan and stick with it through those times is really one of the best ways that we can prepare and navigate that situation.
And you mentioned future retirement. There's many things that people may want to save for: college education for their children. Maybe they want to start a business. Maybe there's some more short-term goals. What are some other things that individuals can do that will help with discipline and help with saving what they need to and be able to make the most of the money they have?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it earlier. I think when you had those individuals that create these systems where a portion of their income just automatically goes to savings, I think that's really necessary. One of the first things that when you're looking at your budget, when you're looking at your money and you identify, okay, I want to save for kids' education, I have these other short-term goals, identifying an amount that you want for that in the near term, and then creating a savings plan for that, and then sticking to that. In some cases, if you have the flexibility to do this, making that the first thing that you do when you budget. So at the beginning of the month, you have a certain amount that goes to these various categories, and then you live off of the remainder. And it's a tough system to implement, but a lot of the people that are most effective at reaching their savings goals do it this way. Instead of, well, I'm going to spend all my money and then what's left over, I'm going to save. So save first, spend later is one of the best ways to do that.
And what are some ways we can sharpen our financial literacy skills?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There are actually a lot of great resources online. One of my favorites is a website called Investopedia.com. They really provide a lot of great questions. If you have a question about car loans or budgeting, they even have a financial literacy section they've built this month. It's really good. And then BYU actually has a personal finance course, and they make all of their information, all their study materials public, all their worksheets. It's a website called personalfinance.byu.edu. And I still use that as a resource when I'm looking up client questions or looking into financial literacy. It's a really valuable resource. There are a lot of good books. There's so many financial books, but a couple good ones, especially one related to budgeting and understanding spending, is a book called Millionaire Next Door. To better understand investing principles, a book by Larry Swedroe called The Incredible Shrinking Alpha. And then I would actually recommend people be careful and cautious around social media, just because there's a lot of advice out there from friends, uncles, that random person down the street, and more often than not, it's not great advice. And social media can set unrealistic expectations as well. And so recognizing that what we're seeing on TikTok or Instagram, these beautiful kitchens, that we don't need to keep up with the Joneses, I think is a really necessary skill to understand with financial literacy. Is you have your goals, you know what you want, and try to not consider what the Joneses are doing.
I think you bring up such an important point that it takes not only discipline, but also our finances. There's a lot of emotion in there, and it can be a very emotional time if you are trying to keep up with other people or if you're having difficulties making ends meet. This has been such a great conversation with excellent advice, Clayton. Where can we find out more about you? And if we feel like we want some more professional advice and want to continue this conversation, how can we contact you?
Yeah, you can contact me. I mean, you can reach out to Squire. I mean, Squire is a fairly well-known company. We have a small group, Squire Wealth Advisors. Oh, look, there's the website right there. You can find me there. I'm on social media as well. I use LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. You can search me there. I try to regularly post information. To me, educating people about finances is one of my passions, and so I try to regularly share worthwhile information about financial literacy, investing, saving, things like that. So those are ways you can reach me.
Well, Clayton Johnson, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your advice and excellent tips on how to navigate finances and becoming more financially literate, especially post-pandemic. We'll be back with more right here on Mountain Connections right after this.